All right, everybody, we are back again, Dynasty Mirror Search for Uhuru. And I have my brother Samuel on with us today from Uganda, but he's here in America now. And we're going to be discussing, should African parents continue to send their kids to the West or to America to be educated? Now, people who are from Ghana are familiar with Kataka cars. All right. Now, Kataka was created by Ghanaian, all right, who has no formal education. He created cars. I think he created like a television that you could operate with your hands without a remote. He's created and invented a lot. Then you have a brother in Zimbabwe. Let me look up his name. I just know he created an electric car. All right. Safe Technologies is the name of the company. His name is Sangulani Chikumbutso, who created an electric car. No formal education in the West. Had his own education in Africa. He created his electric car. So the question is Africa benefiting from Africans coming to America or to the West to be educated, or are they better off creating and being educated in Africa? Go ahead, Samuel.
Right.
And introduce yourself and, tell everybody about, I know you've been, Columbia, Stanford, am I right?
Harvard, Columbia, Northwestern, and University of San Francisco.
Wow. Goodness.
So my bachelor's is from University of San Francisco. I have a graduate degree from Northwestern University. I have a graduate degree from Harvard, and I have a graduate degree from Columbia University in New York City. I'm originally from Uganda, Kampala, Uganda, born and raised. I've been in the U.S. about 11 years now. And I think this is a very important question. It's a very important topic. Like, should African people come to study in the United States, and is Africa really benefiting from it? I think it's kind of like a two-edged thing, because for the most part, like you alluded to, there's some really talented people in Africa.
Right.
Like, growing up in Africa and going to school in Africa, some of the smartest people I've seen in my entire life were in Africa, in Uganda, literally the schools that I went to. So really smart, really talented. But the thing is, it goes back to the I think the whole question and the whole solution circles back to, does the leadership help the people? And it's not that there's a shortage of talent, and it's not that there's a shortage of resourcefulness, but it just goes back to the leadership. Is there systems, is there programs, is there like social conditions in place to give people the opportunities that they need in order to develop their talents, in order to progress them over to the next level? So in the United States, because I'm here in Atlanta, and my undergrad, obviously, University of San Francisco is in Silicon Valley, and we all know Silicon Valley has a huge, ecosystem or network for developing, tech talent. It has a huge network for developing startups and things of that nature. So they have, they have combinators, they have incubators, they have, venture capitalists, they have all these ecosystems that if you literally can come, off the street, but you have a great idea, it can be funded. Now, this gentleman, Kantanka, okay, he's making beautiful cars, but the truth of the matter is that, he's one of the lucky ones. He's one of the few with a great idea that was able to access financing to bring that idea, to bear fruit. But there's tons of people that don't have this access to this ability, and it really is what I see the biggest problem is.
So let's speak on that, because I know a lot of African leaders are educated. There's an echo. Hold on one second. Hello. Okay, it's gone. I know a lot of African leaders are educated in the West. Okay, so they benefit, I guess, not necessarily the people of being educated in the West. but still, why don't they fully support all of this, I would say, ingenuity that's coming out of Africa? Why isn't African ingenuity supported by African leadership, really? Why does it take a lot of American initiatives? You know, because you have YALI, which I think is like the Young African Leadership Institution that's founded here in America. You have a couple other American initiatives sponsored by the American government, which benefits Africans. Why is that?
Okay, did the camera go off? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. It's just your camera's off, but I hear you.
Okay, okay. Let me see. Okay, should I just keep talking or?
Yeah, we can hear you. You can keep talking. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. So the issue with the leadership, is one or twofold. You know, it's a very like, this is a very deep subject, because you know, when Africa was originally colonized, the way those countries were set up were not set up in the interests of African people for the most part. So nine out of 10 times it was set up to serve the interest of the foreigner, to serve the interest of the colonizers. So our government system, let's say in our own case, Uganda, we have a parliament system which is similar to what the British have in London. You know, hello.
Yeah, I'm right here. I just had you on mute. I mean, I muted myself, but go ahead.
Yes. So we have a parliament system that is similar to what they have in the UK. But if you ask a common Ugandan on the street, if you ask them what is a parliament, they wouldn't tell you. And I'm talking about in the capital city. All they know is that politics has a huge impact and affects their lives, but they don't understand how the political system works. So for the most part, the system of governments, the structures in the country, from the top down all the way to the grassroots, are not set up to benefit or to cater to the needs of the everyday Ugandan. So that's why you see there's a lot of talented people. But the government is not responsive to them, because the government is not designed, in effect, to respond to the needs of the Africans. It was designed by the British, for the British, and to basically be a tool for British an extension of the British system into Africa. So we still have to deal and grapple with those effects of that, and we still see that to this very day. And it now boils down to things of like education. And one interesting thing, Uri, that I must tell you is this. You know, in Uganda, they teach us in history class that the first person to discover the source of the Nile River, which begins in Uganda, right?
Right.
Was a British man named Sir Samuel Baker. Sir Samuel Baker was the first British man to discover the source of the Nile River. And it is the most absurd thing, because African people have been living there. But in our history class, they still teach, to this day, I'm talking about 2018, they teach young kids in the equivalent of grade 2 or grade 3, that the first person to discover the source of the Nile River was Sir Samuel Baker, things of that nature. So I think there's a whole revamping that needs to happen to the education system to like change it to respond to the needs of African people. But That's just basically it.
All right, cool. Falcon Black MGTOW says Western education taken back to Africa sounds good on paper, but doesn't gel. Why do you think that's the case?
Western Western education.
He says Western education taken back to Africa sounds good on paper, but doesn't gel. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think that's an interesting take. See, the one thing that's interesting though is that like all the concepts that are taught in education, right? Basically, do not have a race. Like knowledge doesn't have a race, and the issue with Western education though is that they framed everything around white. You know, white is educated, white is this, white is knowledgeable, and then everything that was not white was ignorant, was not, was not civilized. But the truth of the matter is that knowledge doesn't have a race. And the truth, a very keen example would be, let's say, take China. China 30 or 40 years ago was complete backwater. They were just riding bicycles on the street. They didn't have nothing, but because they chose to, educate their people, they were able to lift themselves out of poverty. So I think that for the most part, the education in Africa doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot use that anywhere.
All right, cool. Let's shout out to everybody who's in the chat room. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button as you come in. Also, make sure you share as well. Falcon Black also says the diaspora should not get involved in building Africa. Africa should do it themselves. They need to be pioneers. What are your thoughts on that?
The diaspora should not get involved in building.
Which is weird because China's involved, China's involved, China's involved, China's involved.
Right.
So that's a weird statement. But go ahead. You there? Hello? Did we lose the brother? Hold on. Samuel, can you hear us? Hello? I think we lost the brother. Guys, make sure you hit that like button as you come to the chat. Also, make sure you share as well. The brother's from Uganda. He's not from Liberia, but Liberians are always welcomed on my channel. Always welcome. Thank you for joining us again. The conversation is: should African parents continue to send their children to American universities? Is Africa benefiting from Africans being educated in the West? So somebody said I look like an Igbo mask. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a compliment. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Let's see here. Samuel, you there? Let me text him. Yeah, he lost me. Come back on. Yeah, we had lost him for a second. He's coming back on. I just think I don't know. I just think it's the Africans who are really being creative, I guess, and the ingenuity that's coming out of Africa is from Africans that haven't been educated in the West. So I think this is an interesting conversation that I think should have been had. That should be had. So what do you guys think? That doesn't sound right. Diasporans are Africans. I'm African. My success is Africans. I agree. Brain drain. I asked that next question is Nino Nalotic. What's Nalotic? I gotta look that up. What's up, Liddell? Brain drain. I gotta. We'll talk about that as well. Brain drain. Is there a brain drain? Relating to the Nile River or to the Nile region area, denoting or belonging to a subgroup of Nilo-Saharan languages. I don't know. I look more West African. I don't know. I don't know about that one. East Africans. I don't know. I don't look East African. I disagree with that one. Every time I go to Africa, I'm confused for Nigerian. Every time I go. So I don't know. Hopefully we get the brother back on here shortly. And make sure you guys get the likes up if you're not super chatting. He's rebooting his computer. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. Western education is what built Japan, Korea, and China. Why can't Africa use the same approach? Do Africans have lower IQ levels to be able to at least emulate? Sorry, this upsets me about Africa. Shout out to Chief. Appreciate it, fan. Thank you for joining us. Falcon Black, when are you coming on here to have the MGTOW conversation? And stop running. You know you've been running, Falcon Black. When are you coming on to have the conversation? That's true. I know a lot of Africans in that situation. I know he should be coming back on here shortly. He had to restart his system, his computer. Let me see if he texts me back. And people, I'm willing to go to Liberia. It's just I'm going to Sierra Leone instead in October. So yeah. Let's do it next weekend. Don't run. You know you get that excuse last time. Don't run, Falcon Black. Shout out to y'all in the chat room. What's up, y'all? Oh, let's give the brother 15 more minutes. Well, I'm sorry. Let's give the brother about 5 more minutes. See if he can hop back on. Haven't been to Ethiopia yet, but we'll soon. But we'll soon. We'll soon. All right, let's get a brother a couple more minutes to hop back on. I'll ask him that question as well, Inaret. Shout out to Inaret, everybody. All right, the brother's back. We thought you got, Samuel, we thought you got kidnapped by aliens. All right, the brother is back. Yeah, we had lost you. I forgot where we left off.
You said China is there?
Yeah. I mean, so the brother said the diaspora shouldn't come back and build, but China is obviously building everything.
Yeah, exactly. And China, is big in Africa as we speak.
All right.
Basically, obviously, they're there for their own interest. But the truth of the matter is, the diaspora living in African coming to the United States is basically living for the most part for better life and better economic opportunities. And I bet by now you've heard of all the stories of people who die, like in the Mediterranean, going through the treacherous journey crossing the Sahara. And they were originally living from Libya because Libya has the closest tip north to Europe. So the journey by boat from Libya to Europe basically is not that far as if you went from another point in Africa. So these very difficult stories of people trying to escape difficult circumstances in Africa for a better life in the West. So the people here living in the West are not really trying to go back because they know what they came from. And especially when you make a good life for yourself and you've achieved a certain level of success and comfort, then you don't want to go back to a situation where you're going to suffer, unless you have it made to the point where you go back. Because a lot of times in Africa, if you have money, you're okay. But unless you have it made, then you don't necessarily want to go back. And that's why you don't see a lot of people, at least the African diaspora, going back to Africa, because they know what they have come from. Now, on the other hand, the Western diaspora, who is the African Americans, the European Americans, the Caribbean Americans, I'm sorry, African Americans, Europe, Afro-Europeans, Afro-Latinos, or whatever, have a lot to also contribute to Africa. But for the most part, the image of Africa in the minds of a lot of people around the world is that one of negativity. They feel that, first and foremost, let's start with the fact that Africa has 54 countries. In the minds of a lot of people, Africa is just one huge landmass with, suffering and poverty and and all these difficult situations that happen, on the ground. But not realizing that there's actually a lot of opportunity in Africa, which China is taking advantage of. You see, one of the people that I was speaking to way back was telling me, he was from Belgium. Mm-hmm. He was telling me that in his country, there was the big conversation was around the tables, in the boards, whatever was that. Should we go into Africa? Should we take our business into Africa? They are talking about it, but they are not necessarily acting or pulling the trigger, right?
Right.
But China doesn't have that. For them, they're just, let us go.
Right.
So they are taking advantage of the promise that Africa has, and Africa is growing as a direct result of China investing.
Let's deal with brain drain. I know a lot of people talk about Africa suffering from brain drain. Is there any facts to that? Any truth to that?
Yes, there's a lot of truth. You see, the people here that we see who are in the West, those are like the cream of the crop. The people in the village, for the most part, are not going to be like, hey, let me jump on a boat and or let me come on a plane and go to Europe or United States. No. The people that make that journey, that immigrate out, for the most part, are the educated class. That is the cream of the crop. The people that have spent a lot of money in their education, a lot of time in their education, and the society that has invested a lot in them. So, for the most part, when that part of the population leaves, they don't have a way to contribute back into the economy, or to the countries like they necessarily would have. And then another issue, when African immigrants leave Africa, go to Europe or to the United States, there's this issue of underemployment, because you find you have accountants, you have all these highly skilled people leaving Africa, coming to the West, and cannot find work in their respective fields. So they have to forage, maybe work at McDonald's, or drive Uber, things of that nature, just to make ends meet. And that is also another concept called brain waste, because you have all these highly educated, talented people who are just sitting there and rotting on the vine, when they could have actually contributed a lot, to make everybody's lives better in the host countries in which they live. But because of all all these different things that exist, maybe lack of networks, or maybe because of social biases, or maybe they don't understand the culture that much, so they basically come to the United States and then or Europe for that matter, and are underemployed, and then their skills just go to waste in that respect. But another point I just wanted to make about this was that, for the most part, in the host countries, people live in, it doesn't necessarily mean that if they went back, that those countries could absorb them again.
Right.
Because for the most part, it goes back to the leadership. The leadership in Africa has been very, very poor, and it has been poor it has been set that way because for the most part, um, um, we have leaders who some of them are supported from outside. You know, there's also a lack of understanding of how politics work in Africa by the local population. I mean, if you came to some country in Africa and said, I wanted to run for I wanted to be your senator or parliamentarian for this area, and you gave people salt and sugar and things of that nature, and people will vote for you. You understand? But they don't understand that you don't vote on the basis of salt and sugar. You vote based upon what can this person do to make our life. And this is a problem with Africa. That for the most part, the leadership has been corrupted by people just wanting to self-serve, and then also supported by nefarious forces from the outside who don't necessarily mean the continent good, and the people are powerless in the sense to fight back. The system wasn't designed to take care of people to begin.
What about someone asked in the chat room, are you considering and let me give a shout out to the super chats first. In the red, thank you so much for the super chat. I'll ask your question next. Shout out to K Love. I enjoy the variety of topics, brother. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Free your mind. Thank you. And brother Chief Adreno. And I'll get to your question as well. Thank you for the super chat. Someone was asking in the chat room, do you plan on going back to Uganda to help build?
Uganda, yeah. I'm from Uganda, and I do plan to go back at some point. If I got what I wanted, I would go back yesterday. Understand? But the truth of the matter is the situation. Africa again goes back to the leadership. It's very chaotic. The people are extremely bright. The people are extremely resourceful. The people are extremely talented. And if given the right environment, because I was there this past May, and just to see the energy, just to see what the people were creating with very, very little given back to them. They were creating so much. If the government can even work half as well as it works up here, I'm telling you, Africa is going to be a superpower.
Right.
The issue is that nothing works. I mean, they want it that way. You understand? They want it that way, that nothing should work. And when nothing works, people make money. You understand? In that inefficiency. So let's say, for example, you wanted a passport. Just pick country X. And I'm not going to pick out any, but just pick country X, and you wanted a passport. So you go to the passport office and say, hey, Mr. Passport Officer, please help me. I need a passport. I need to travel to this conference. It's in Japan, and it's very, very important that I be there because I'm speaking. So how soon can you give me my passport? Now, in the rules, it says that this is what you need to have. You need to have this document. You need to have a birth certificate. You need to get a stamp from the chairman in your subdivision, and da-da-da-da-da. So you go and do all that, right? But when you come back, they will say, hey, look, the person in the passport office traveled, and what that means is that, hey, look, can you give me $200 under the table?
Right.
Give me $200 under the table, and then your passport is going to move. But if you now insist and say, hey, Mr. Passport, this is your job. This is your job. How can you? The thing is going to sit there for like 3 or 4 weeks. So it's intentionally set up in a way for it not to work, because that inefficiency is a way for them to make money, And it would be very sad, let's say, in this, if, let's say, for example, you wanted to get a driver's license and you go to the DMV, and the lady sitting at the counter is saying, give me $100 to, I mean, you look at them like they're crazy, right? But this is what happens in a lot of these places around the world. And the inefficiency and the poverty that you see in third world, quote unquote third world, they call them developing countries now, is not because the people are lazy, it's not because people don't have ingenuity, but it is because the government systems are ineffective. Government systems are not doing what they need to do. So this is what is creating all this problem. So going back as one person, right? Yes, you might be able to help. You might be able. Me personally, I plan. When I go back, I want to go into the. But I'll say that for another day. I'll bring that topic up another day.
Let's see here, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button. Another thing too, John Harris. I have no issue with you listening in. I have no problem. I mean, you're more than welcome to listen. This is an open platform. Now, I wouldn't necessarily in the red. John Harris is not a brother, but I mean, yeah, they're gonna listen in anyway. At least he's open, and he's being honest. We have a pan European nationalist in our chat room. So, I mean, how should I address this, Samuel?
I'm sorry, pan-European nationalist?
Yes.
Oh, so I'll say this though. At the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, what I've found, and I like this platform because it gives an opportunity to express different points of view that might not have otherwise gotten an out. So it's actually good because it exposes people to different points of view and different points of thinking. Now, at the end of the day, this if the person is, I think for the most part, if somebody has something to contribute to make your life better, it doesn't matter what color they come in. Like knowledge and education and things of that nature don't have a color. Electricity in the United States works the same as it does in Africa. Gravity in the United States works the same, in Japan as it does in Zimbabwe. It doesn't change. These things stay the same. So just because somebody has a different color doesn't mean that if they got infected with malaria, it's not going to harm them the same as somebody that. So if they take
well, I mean, this is my thing. I really don't have an issue with him in the chat room because at least he's open and being honest and being transparent instead of trolling like some of these other. Now, let me ask you this, John Harris: do you consider yourself a white supremacist? I'll wait for him to answer. But I think that's his name, John Harris. That his name. John Harris. I mean, they're gonna. You can't stop them from trolling anyway. So it's.
Oh yeah, trolling is a different thing now.
Yeah. He says I'm a pan-European.
Man, no, the trolling is different.
Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, if they got nothing positive to contribute, they got.
Yeah, he's not trolling, so it's whatever. But okay. I mean, basically, what he says: all indigenous people rights. Africa should be African. How can I disagree with that?
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, it was whatever.
Right.
So it's whatever. All right, go ahead and continue.
Right. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, Africa is sitting in a pretty good place right now. In about 10, 15 years, Africa is going to explode economically, and we are all looking to go back because now the innovations coming out of Africa actually now hitting to the point whereby they have potential to solve a lot of problems around the world. In Uganda, my home country, they just discovered a way to just two young engineers, Ugandan engineers, educated in Uganda, never studied anywhere outside of the country, found a way to diagnose malaria because malaria you had to inject, they had to draw blood from your arm, then take it to the lab and then diagnose it that way. They found a way to do it through magnets and laser and light beams to diagnose if you have malaria, and it's about 80% accuracy as we speak right now. So Africa has a lot of talent, but if the politics get fixed, then you're going to see a completely different face of. And this is what the outsiders, basically the former colonial powers, didn't want. They would always install like stooges. If you look back at, I think it's something like 22 African heads of state that have been killed since Africa started getting independence in the 1960s. You know, from Patrice Lumumba, from Silvio Olympio, from Thomas Sankara, you know, to Thomas Biko. You know, people of that nature who were basically standing up and saying, "Hey, look, we can basically do this." And then every time that they would try to organize the people, then they would get eliminated, and they would get shot, taken out. So if we can figure out a way to control our own politics to the point whereby outsiders don't come in to influence what we're doing, then Africa has a much better chance. But I think at the end of the day, we are grappling with the forces that are much bigger than one person. So although it does take us supporting one another and doing that.
Brother, you keep going in and out a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's better now. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, if we support one another, then we can basically build it up to the point that it gets as strong as it is. But as we speak right now, no, the countries are basically designed to serve for it in terms of local Africa.
All right, cool. Let's see here. Let me get to some of these super chat questions. Indirect wants to know, is Uganda open to Black Americans coming in, investing and building in Uganda?
Oh my God, that's a very good question. That is a very, very good question. Yes, Uganda is actually open. There's tons of African American people, at least that I know, that have been asking me this question about, hey, should I go back to Africa? Should I invest? And I know a few that have gone over there and invested. The truth of the matter is, Africa is like this. Africa has a ton of opportunities, but they don't have access to capital. And if you have access to capital, you can make a lot of money in Africa. And I'll give you an example. In about when I was growing up, and I think this is maybe like in 1999, like the late 90s, or I want to say around there. There was, or was it? No, I want to say mid 90s, like the mid 90s. There was this whole thing of when they had those rotary phones, the huge landline that you had to say you're going to be home at 6, and then you call at 6.
Yeah.
So that's what they had. So there was an Egyptian, a Sudanese engineer. He was working in the UK. So he built a web service, and he sold it for like about £1 billion, right?
Right.
He took that web service, he took that £1 billion and invested in mobile telecommunications in East Africa. So everybody was telling him, look, you cannot succeed investing in mobile in Africa. It's basically a loss. It's going to make no money. This is basically what they told him. But he persevered, and this man built a company called Celtel. And as we speak now, the man is a billionaire. The man is a billionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth of the matter is, the richest Black people on the face of the planet are business people from Africa, Black business people from Africa. And I'm talking about not billionaires in local currency. I'm talking about billionaires in dollars. So the richest Black people, who's the richest? I think Oprah might be the richest Black person.
No. It's the Aliko Dangote.
Yeah. So Aliko Dangote is maybe about 20 billion, and the richest that is about 10 times what the richest Black person is in anywhere in the world. 10 times in terms of like net worth. So I say that only just just to highlight the level of opportunity that is in Africa. And his businesses, Aliko Dangote, his businesses operate strictly in Africa. They don't operate outside of Africa. And this man has been able to amass 20 or 25 billion US dollars in terms of wealth.
You know, he's trying to actually expand in America now.
Yeah, and I wouldn't fault him, because there's tons of opportunity in the United States. I mean, a good businessman like he is always a good businessman.
All right, then we have another question, super chat question. Hold on one second. So we answered that. Let me get to the other brother's question, Chief Nero. Western education is what built Japan, Korea, and China. Why can't Africa use the same approach? Do Africans have lower IQ levels to be able to at least emulate? Sorry, this upsets me about Africa. What are your thoughts on that statement?
That is a funny question, but I'll answer it to the best of my ability.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that tons of times, and not that the question is bad. I mean, at the end of the day, you need to ask what you need to ask. But the funny part of it is that idea of lower IQs, and I've heard this like tons of times. And I go back to tell you that I've studied at some of the best universities of this country, but I'm yet to find an African person that has failed out of a university in the West. I'm yet to find one. It's impossible. They will never do it. And you know, Africa has some of the brightest people I've ever seen anywhere. Like, the Africans can compete with anybody, with the best of them. It doesn't matter whether they're white, Asian, I do not care. The Africans can compete, and if we took our best and our brightest and pit them against your best and your brightest, I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10, we will come out on top, because we are resilient and we fight for whatever we have. And we can make nothing out of something. So this idea of like lower IQs is kind of like a myth. I think it's kind of that whole idea, Western propagated idea, that, you know, if you are not one way, or if you don't speak English, or if you don't eat with a fork, or if you don't eat my food, then you're not civilized. It doesn't work like that. You know, I think talent in the world is distributed evenly, but in our community and in the Black community, to be honest with you, Black people have a lot of talented people. They have a lot of talented people and across the board. Just like they have talented people in sports, in entertainment, and in media, whatever. They have talented people in engineering. They have talented people in science. They have talented people in technology. But it goes back to the fact, harkens back to the fact that the societies are not organized. They're not organized well. The government, the leaders, and if I can say, I cannot stress this enough, the leaders is the problem. The leaders, if they can get a good leader, if they can get good leaders into those seats, then things will change. Things will change and be completely different. And I'll give an example. You take a look at a country like Botswana. See, Botswana is a small country in southern Africa.
Mm-hmm.
About not more, if there are many, there are 5 million people, but even I wouldn't say they wouldn't reach that much. But they've been able to manage their resources. They've got diamonds, Botswana. Corruption is pretty low, and they've been able to manage their resources. And Botswana is for a Black country, is one of the best run Black countries on the face of this planet. They're just small, humble, quiet people, but their leadership was able to be very wise. Whenever they mine a diamond, the government keeps 80% of diamond revenues. And they're able to invest that into education, into healthcare, into things of that nature, to the betterment of their population. And their political structure is designed to favor the indigenous population. So they've been pretty astute and smart in how they've managed their resources. So it has nothing to do with inherent IQ. African peoples have some of the highest IQs, I can tell you, and having had the opportunity to go to some of the best schools and study with some of the best and the brightest, I can tell you that I have and we have some of the highest IQs that that this planet has, but we don't necessarily get maybe the opportunities um, because again, still the system in the West is designed a certain way, and maybe for the most part, a lot of African people, even with their talent, don't necessarily have access to a lot of opportunities that give them an outlet to express that talent and to express that creativity and ingenuity and intelligence as well. So, but that question of low IQs is actually complete nonsense.
So Ray Alexander is asking, what would African immigrants do if President Trump closed the USA borders to African immigration? Would that force Africans to build better nations?
Africa is already building. A better Africa. In about 20 years, in about 15 to 20 years, because Africa is sitting right now, is sitting where China was about 15 or 20 years ago, and we all know, the clout that China has in the world right now. So if Trump necessarily closed, because you understand that United States for the most part is a function of immigration, function of they need a lot of them in to run the country. There's tons of jobs that Americans are not willing to do that immigrants would take that vital to the running of the country. So for the most part, immigration obviously, but to still,
Brother, you're going in and out.
oh, it's going on.
Yeah, you keep going in and out.
I don't know what's going on.
But go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's kind of a short, like a hot button issue, and the truth of the matter is that if the borders are closed to immigration, it means that the country misses out on talent. And for example, I'll give one of the huge drivers of the economy is Silicon Valley, right? So Silicon Valley out in California, but the majority of the people that run Silicon Valley are immigrants. And if they shut the door to immigration, then you guess what happens to Silicon Valley? Silicon Valley is going to take a tank because the majority of people that earn advanced degrees, especially in STEM fields, are foreigners and Africans, for that matter. African immigrants in the United States, 16% of them are more likely to have a master's, a PhD, and some kind of graduate, medical degree, pharmacy degree. About 16% of Africans, 25 and above, and this is compared to about 11% of native-born population here in the United States. So the truth of the matter is, if they shut the doors to that, it shuts the door to a lot of immigration. But at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want to do. And the one point I was going to talk about is that for the most part, the majority of African students don't study here in the United States. China, for the most part, hosts the majority of African students. The trend has been declining. It has been going down. So the African students are now opting to go to China more than coming to the United States or to the UK.
All right. So John Harris in the chat room says, hold on one second. I really hate the word alt-right. It usually implies Nazism. I am an indigenous rights activist for all people, but what they focus on Europeans. So the question is, John Harris, why are you here in our chat about Africa? But anyways, go ahead and continue, Samuel.
Yeah, so the trolls are coming out now, huh?
Yeah, he's probably just wants to get information. But I mean, this is not a private video. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure he could view this later. So that's why I'm really not tripping about him being in the chat room. So, yeah, but go ahead and continue.
Yeah, so For the most part, African people are not necessarily coming to the United States or the UK. They're actually now opting to go out to.
I'm sorry, this isn't a private forum. This is a public forum. It's a public video. It'll be posted on YouTube. So that's why I'm really not tripping with him being in the chat room. But go ahead. But hopefully he answers that question. Go ahead.
Right. So yeah, so for the most part, Africans are now opting to study more in China as opposed to the United States or Europe. And in China, after you graduate, you cannot work there, so they tend to go back. For the most part, I'd say about 99% of them go back to Africa after graduating. So we're seeing the majority of people now in Africa that are building Africa actually trained in China as opposed to being trained in the West. So this is another trend that we're seeing. It's not necessarily that people are coming to the West; they're actually going to China more than they're coming to the West.
Okay, cool. Let's see what else we have in the chat room. What we'll do. Let's see here. What we'll do. We'll go ahead and close out. Thank you for joining. Let's see here. Any other questions in the chat room? Any other questions in the chat room, people, for Brother Samuel? And also, please hit that like button. We have 113 people watching, only 58 likes. Okay, this is an interesting question or statement by John Harris, the indigenous activist with a focus on Europe. He says Europeans will be affected by what happens in Africa, and I just generally like hearing about indigenous rights. Samuel, if you could unpackage that for us.
European people will be affected by what happens in Africa?
Yeah.
Of course they will be affected by what happens in Africa, because Europe has traditionally, okay, look at West Africa. West Africa has had the majority of its wars, the majority of its conflicts had a direct influence from France, because Francophone Africa is basically the most unstable part of Africa, right?
Right.
And whenever like a leader would rise up, most recently was Laurent Gbagbo, when he rose up and he said, "Hey, look, in Ivory Coast, we produce all this cocoa, we produce all this, natural. We have all these natural resources, and we don't want to necessarily have to, sell them to France first, without getting a crack of selling them to the national market."
Right. In the French military came in and it took them out.
Exactly. The French military came in by way of Burkina Faso, with the help of Blaise Compaoré, who they used, by the way, in 1987 to kill Thomas Sankara.
And then Blaise Compaoré, I think, was on exile in Ivory Coast, right? I think he's still there, isn't he?
I think he's there in Ivory Coast, and but I think in the person now in Ivory Coast is basically a French stooge. And it goes back to that. There's an interview, actually, if you look it up, by what was that French president? Dominique.
With the previous one, the current one is I can't think. Which one?
It's the one not before Sarkozy. Before the one before Sarkozy. I think it was the one before Sarkozy. I forget his name, but anyway, it will come back to me. And he's famously for saying that France would be a third world country if it wasn't for Africa.
Right.
And there's a lot to that. There's a lot. That is not an idle statement. They gain their sustenance, like France in Western Europe, for that matter, has been gaining their sustenance from Africa. And if you want to do some research, there's the 14 countries that make up French West Africa. It's called have a common currency. It's called
CFA.
Yeah, CFA.
Which is trash outside of those countries.
It's complete trash, and
I tell the story when I was in I had some Safa on me, and I'm thinking, okay, this is the French franc or whatever you want to call it. I was in Paris at the airport trying to buy something with it, and people were looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, what is this? I can't do anything with this.
Exactly.
And then, but what's crazy though, the countries that were colonial, that were the I would say the like Morocco, the Arab African countries that were colonized by the French, they don't use the Safa. Like in Morocco, same thing. They looked at me like I was crazy. Like, what is this?
Yeah, exactly. It is only French West Africa, the black parts. And what's funny is that currency is banked in the French treasury. And then to get your money, because when you get your money, you put I think it's about 80% of it in the French treasury. And
Right.
you want to get money to pay your teachers, and you want to get money to pay your doctors, and
They loan it out to you.
they loan it out to you at market rates, and they
Crazy.
want to loan you about 20%. So think about it. Like if you, let's say, are working a job, and you have to put 80% of your money in your bank, and you can't touch it. And then when you want to pay a bill, you have to go borrow your money from the bank to pay it. How is your country going to develop? And this is what is happening in French West Africa. I mean, and meanwhile, they are not disclosing how they are using that money. There's gangsterism behind it. They're not disclosing how they're using that money to essentially, because it's accruing interest.
Right.
So do we get the interest back? Like, where is the interest going with that money? Like, who keeps the interest of that money? So this is all these questions that keep on accruing, and then people keep wondering why French West Africa is still the poorest part of Africa. It's because the French with the France Afrique have that policy where they get a grip on a hold of the leaders, and then they shaft them, they shaft the people, and now they basically have nothing because they take everything that the people. They take all the wealth. I think France has the right to, let's say, one of the CFA countries had a contract to build like a bridge. France has the first right of refusal, which basically means that they have the first right to say no. So when France says no, then China or somebody else can come in and actually bid for the contract. It's just complete gangsterism, and that's no way to run a country, and that's no way an economy can.
Let's see. Last question. Tribalism. Someone's asking. Internet wants to know how's the tribalism in Uganda, if it's a issue.
Yeah, tribalism exists, but Africans are a very plural people. We know how to live together. In some countries, like Cameroon, we have over 300 tribes in a single country, but for thousands of years they were able to live together. And even now, if you look at it, there are no more wars in Africa. Like with all the plurality and the differences, Africans have been able to for the most part silence the guns in the majority of the continent. There's just a few places where there are like conflicts, and the conflicts are just stupid things, started by an outside mentality, an outside ideology. It's either Christians fighting Muslims or English speaking fighting French, just stupid things. And it's basically from the outside. But for the most part, Africans they know how to live together, even with differences. And it's not really like a big deal. So tribalism basically comes into play when there's power or governmental power involved. So it would be if, let's say, who are you from one tribe, and then and I'm from the same tribe, and then I got into power, and I say, hey, Uhuru, you're from my tribe, you come here, you hold this $10,000, but somebody from the other tribe who is not from our tribe doesn't get the money, then, that's where now the tribalism comes in, because they're using the state that is supposed to represent everybody to favor somebody from their own tribe. So this is basically the problem. The problem is just that it's not that people cannot live together. And then when the other person that is not from that tribe sees it, it's like, hey, how can you people, you're letting us starve here. You're eating the money of the state. So also me, when I get into power, they're like, okay, Let's, you know, this is the problem. But the tribalism just comes because of political power and access to resources. It doesn't come because people inherently are, oh, yeah, you are this tribe or that. No, no, no. That if it was just like that, then nobody really cares because people can live together and they have been doing so for thousands of years very peacefully. You know, it's just when the outsiders came in, colonialism brought in a whole different bunch of its own problems into the continent, and that caused people to, you know, go against their, you know, brothers and sisters or whatever, to, you know, because of political and economic gain.
All right, last question, I promise. Internet wants to know, is Uganda growing as much as its surroundings, Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania? You know, East Africa, even though I'm partial to West Africa, I'm a West African cat, East Africa is developing quicker and faster and better than West Africa. Why is that? And is Uganda growing as much? Because I know you guys have would you consider, is it Museveni the president? Museveni? Would you consider him to be a dictator? Because he's been in office for a while. Now he's been in office since Idi Amin left, correct?
Well, he's been there. Yeah, because when Idi Amin left, the president that Idi Amin overthrew, Milton Obote, came, I think, came back into power. Then there was another president, and then Museveni overthrew that president. So he came into power in '85, and has been in power, what, 32 years now? 33 years he's been in power now. So to say, I really don't want to comment on that because I have to go back home. That's my
okay. All right, got you. Okay, okay. Can you comment on if it's growing, like Kenya and Tanzania and Rwanda, etc.?
Yeah. I would say East Africa has been growing really well. If you look at Rwanda now, oh my God, Rwanda, under the leadership of Paul Kagame, it's completely. Rwanda is going to be Rwanda. I'm telling you, Rwanda is beautiful, beautiful country. The economy is growing. They're attracting a whole lot of foreign direct investment, a lot of infrastructure going up. A lot of people like to group Ethiopia in East Africa. Ethiopia is another one that is growing really well. So Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda is going pretty good, but it's you know, I'd much rather comment off of air. But you know, yeah, let's just say that our man has been there 30 years, and our man has I'll just say he has been there 30 years. Yeah, no, I think our leadership needs we need a refresh. And if we get the right people into power, like what is happening in Rwanda, Rwanda's got fantastic leadership under Paul Kagame. The former president of the African Development Bank, Donald Kaberuka, was Rwandese, and under his leadership, he led that bank to, the bank gained so much clout in the world, you know, that people were saying, hey, Kaberuka needs to, if he was to run for, you know, president of Africa, people should let him go because they have such talented leadership in their country, and they bring that to the fore and let that drive the agenda of the research, the affairs of the country. So Ethiopia, the same way, it's going beautifully. I think right now they opened up their tram system that circles the whole of the capital city. They have refreshed their roads. It's got brand new, fresh roads. They've got like skyscrapers going up. The economies are growing. They have like industrial parks that they're investing in the area. They have a new dam. They have a new dam coming online. I think it was worth about $4 billion. That
you're talking about Ethiopia, right?
Ethiopia, yeah.
Now, from my understanding, this dam could cause a war between Ethiopia and Egypt. Is that true? I guess over the water rights of the Nile River, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think Egypt was basically going off of an agreement that was signed in the era
by Europeans doing colonialism.
Yes, exactly, yeah. The colonies, but and in particular the British, and the British said that Egypt had the right to the majority of the waters of the Nile. But then in about 2011, the countries where the Nile, you know, they call them, I think they call them the riparian countries or something of that nature. But So it's basically Uganda, my country, where the Nile starts. And then the largest part of the Nile is the Blue Nile, which starts in Ethiopia, that feeds the majority of the water into the Nile. They came together and said, hey, look, we have this tremendous resource. There's no reason why we shouldn't benefit from it. So Egypt was saying, okay, look, we have this agreement based up of 1965 that was signed by the British that gives us access to the majority of the waters of the Nile. And then the Africans were like, no, that's nonsense.
Sure.
We have to revisit this thing, and we have to use the resources that we have to develop our countries. So they signed a new agreement, which Egypt refused to attend. But the Sudan, which was also an Arab country and was backing Egypt at that point, came to their senses when they saw it, that if this dam could go into effect, it would be a huge resource to them, because it would stop a lot of the droughts and the famine, and would supply them with electricity, because the dam is going to produce a lot of electricity that Ethiopia cannot consume on its own. So it's got tons of electricity to export, right? So the Sudanese turned around and said, hey, look, we're going to join the initiative. But then Egypt, because it's majority a desert country, only has to rely on the Nile. And the majority of life in Egypt, which I think is about some 700 million people, live basically on the Nile. So
wow.
Their fear was that if Ethiopia was damming up the Nile, it would reduce the amount of water going up into Egypt, and then people would basically die of drought or whatever the case was. Wow. So their thing was basically survival. They were like looking at it like, we need to survive by any way, shape, or form. So when Ethiopia now was going about it, Egypt was basically saying, we reserve the right to the option to fight you over the dam. But then surrounding countries who are going to benefit from the dam, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Sudan, were basically not going to allow it. And they said, hey, look, if you attack Ethiopia, then it's an act of aggression, basically on, you're basically attacking all the other countries. So Egypt is kind of like isolated in this case, because there's a united effort around the African countries who basically see the dam as a very strategic and important way for them to get access to hydroelectric power. And I'll say another thing though, because Ethiopia tried to get this dam from outside for decades, and nobody would touch it. But then they eventually got and gathered their money internally. They actually self-finance this money from their diaspora. So the Ethiopians living here in the United States and abroad all brought their money together, and it's kind of self-finance. So they were saying, if anybody touches the dam, it's touching their money. So they are basically going to have to go to war. And they are prepared. They really mean that. They are going to go to war over that dam. So Egypt can see that resolve. So they have no other option but to basically sit down on the negotiating table to come to a resolution and say, hey, look, let us talk about this before things get out of hand. But I think it's eventually going to be resolved without a bullet or a shot being fired in the end.
That's good. Well, brother, thank you so much for joining us. Anything you want to share in closing? Also, if you want to give people your contact information, go ahead. And we still got to link up. I'm in Atlanta, so this weekend coming up, if you want to meet, have some Senegalese or Ghanaian food, just let me know.
All right, that sounds good.
Okay, yeah, but go ahead, close out, and if you want to give people your contact information, go ahead.
Sure. You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is Real Somewhere, which is RealSamwir on Instagram.
And guys, I'll put his contact information in the description box as well. But once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you go to search for Uhuru on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook. Also go to Africa Personified on those same platforms. Make sure you go to searchforhuru.com, DynastyMirror.com, go to AfricaPersonified.Africa, and then also go to Amazon.com, search your name, Dynasty Mirror. Please buy a book. Again, thank you for joining us. Till next time. And good night, everybody. I won't be back till tomorrow. Peace.